The royal mating auction was where unwanted women went when the rest of the kingdom had finished deciding their worth. Evelyn Carter knew that before she ever stepped through its iron doors. She knew it when the guards fastened a thin silver bracelet around her wrist and stamped the number 27 onto a small ivory card. She knew it when the auction attendant looked at the gray veil covering her face and sighed as though Evie had personally made his evening more difficult. And she knew it now, standing at the far end of a raised marble platform while hundreds of strangers stared. Lot 27, someone whispered below. The veiled one. A woman laughed softly. Evie lowered her head. Good. Let them laugh. Let them think she was ashamed. It was safer than letting them wonder why her fingers were trembling beneath the sleeves of her plain blue dress. 26 women stood beside her. Some were beautiful enough to belong in royal portraits. Others had been rejected by former mates, widowed without protection, or expelled from packs that no longer wanted another mouth to feed. Every woman here needed to be chosen. Except Evie. She desperately needed the opposite. The auctioneer crossed the platform, his polished boots striking marble. Ladies and gentlemen, honored alphas and representatives of the crown, we begin. Applause rolled through the hall. Evie swallowed. Above them hung enormous silver chandeliers. Pack banners covered the stone walls, each displaying the crest of an alpha wealthy enough to purchase a mating contract. Beyond the platform, men watched. Evaluated. Selected. Evie curled her fingers against her palms. Don't touch me. The thought came with every breath. Don't choose me. She had spent 3 years hiding what happened when a powerful shifter held her skin too long. 3 years learning to keep gloves on, sleeves down, distance between herself and anyone capable of recognizing what she was. Tonight, a single ceremonial touch could destroy all of it. Lot 1. The auction began. One by one, women stepped forward. Names were announced. Bloodlines recited. Offers made. A blonde Omega beside Evie received 3 bids before the auctioneer finished describing her family. Another was chosen by a widowed alpha from the Western Territories. Then another, and another. Each departure shortened the line. 20 women became 15. 15 became 9. Evie's heartbeat grew steadier. Perhaps this would work. Her veil had already discouraged every man who looked her way. Heavy gray fabric concealed everything below her eyes, and rumors had done the rest. Scarred, diseased, cursed, hideous. Evie had heard every version. She had never corrected one. Tonight, ugliness was protection. Lot 23. Chosen. 24. Chosen. 25. A merchant alpha hesitated, then raised his hand. Chosen. The woman beside Evie began crying when someone called for 26. Within minutes, she too was gone. Silence settled around Evie. She stood alone. The auctioneer looked at his ledger, then at her. His mouth tightened. Lot 27. Evelyn Carter. 24 years old. Unaffiliated Omega. No registered pack. No recognized family line. Murmurs spread through the hall. Evie stared at the marble beneath her shoes. Miss Carter will approach. She forced herself forward. One step, then another. The entire hall seemed to breathe around her. The auctioneer waited. No hands rose. A few seconds passed. Then 10. Someone near the front chuckled. Perhaps show us what we're buying. More laughter. Heat climbed Evie's throat, but she did not lift her head. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Miss Carter's veil is permitted under crown exemption. What is she hiding? Probably a face that would frighten a rogue. Laughter broke louder this time. Evie's nails bit into her palms. She had survived worse than laughter. She could survive another minute. If nobody claimed her, the crown would send her to one of its labor estates before sunrise. Hard work, little freedom, but no mating contract. No alpha touching her. No one discovering the truth. For the first time that night, hope stirred. The auctioneer glanced toward the royal clerk. Going once. Evie's breath caught. Going twice. Almost. Her shoulders loosened. Lot 27 remains on. The great doors slammed open. The sound cracked through the hall like thunder. Every whisper died. Evie froze. Bootsteps crossed the stone behind the audience. Slow. Heavy. Unhurried. No herald announced the newcomer. None was necessary. Men who had spent the evening sitting with the careless confidence of predators suddenly stood. Heads bowed. Even the auctioneer stepped backward. A pressure rolled through the room, invisible but unmistakable, making every shifter on the platform stiffen. Evie's pulse stumbled. She knew that kind of power. Everyone in the kingdom did. Your Majesty, the auctioneer breathed. Evie looked up despite herself. Alpha King Alexander Blackwood walked beneath the chandeliers. He was taller than she had imagined, dressed not for ceremony, but in a black military coat, still carrying traces of rain across the shoulders. Dark hair swept back from a severe face. Silver-gray eyes moved across the room with the calm indifference of a man accustomed to having entire halls wait for his decision. The most powerful alpha in the northern packs had come to a place meant for the unwanted, and he looked thoroughly unimpressed. Alexander stopped before the platform. His gaze passed over the empty spaces where 26 women had stood. Then it reached Evie. For one terrible second, their eyes met. Something inside her chest tightened. His expression did not change, but his gaze stopped. Evie forgot to breathe. The auctioneer hurried forward. Your Majesty, we weren't informed that you intended to participate. I didn't. Alexander's voice was quiet. That somehow made the room listen harder. His eyes remained on Evie. Why is she still standing there? The auctioneer gave an uncomfortable laugh. Lot 27 received no offers, Your Majesty. Alexander looked around the hall. At all? No, Your Majesty. A strange silence followed. Then Alexander returned his attention to the lone woman beneath the gray veil. Evie's heart began pounding. No. The auctioneer lowered his voice. We were about to declare her unclaimed. Alexander studied her for another long moment. Then he stepped toward the platform. Don't. One word. Evie's blood turned cold. Don't. The Alpha King's command settled over the auction hall. The auctioneer froze with his mouth half open. Evie did not move. For one foolish second, she told herself Alexander Blackwood could have meant something else. Perhaps he objected to the auction ending. Perhaps he had come for another matter entirely. Then he walked toward her. Each measured step tightened something inside her chest. The crowd parted without being told. Alexander stopped at the foot of the platform and looked up at Evie. Who hasn't been chosen? The auctioneer blinked. Your Majesty? Alexander's silver-gray eyes shifted toward him. It was enough. Miss Carter, the man answered quickly. Evelyn Carter. Lot 27. Evie hated hearing her name attached to that number. Alexander glanced at the empty platform. And the others? Claimed under contract, Your Majesty. All 26. Yes. His gaze returned to Evie. So she's the last. A nervous ripple moved through the audience. Evie could almost hear what they were thinking. Of course she was. The veiled woman. The unwanted Omega. The ugly duckling no alpha had been desperate enough to claim. Alexander stepped onto the platform. Evie's body reacted before her mind did. She moved back. Only half a step. But he noticed. Those unervingly pale eyes dropped briefly to her feet before rising to her face again. Are you afraid of me? The question was quiet enough that only those nearest could hear. Evie forced air into her lungs. Yes. A few shocked whispers broke out. Nobody admitted fear to an Alpha King. Alexander's expression barely changed. At least you're honest. He turned toward the auctioneer. I'll take the last one. Silence. Then someone laughed. The sound died almost immediately, but others had already begun whispering. Evie's stomach dropped. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. Your Majesty, the auctioneer said carefully. Perhaps you would prefer to review tomorrow's candidates. Several noble families have. I said I'll take her. Evie found her voice. No. This time the silence felt dangerous. Alexander slowly faced her. Across the hall, someone gasped. Evie's heartbeat hammered against her ribs, but she couldn't stop now. Please, she said softer. Choose someone else. His eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Because if you touch me, your wolf may know. Because if your wolf knows, you may start asking questions. Because questions were how people disappeared. Evie said none of it. You could have anyone. A strange flicker crossed his face. That wasn't my question. Her throat tightened. Alexander came one step closer. Evie retreated again. His attention sharpened. The entire hall seemed to disappear around them. You entered a mating auction, he said. Yet you don't want to be chosen. I didn't enter willingly. That caused a murmur. Alexander glanced toward the crown clerk. The clerk immediately lowered his eyes. Debt? Alexander asked. Evie nodded. Her mother's final illness had left more than grief behind. Medicines, healers, burial fees. Evie had worked for 2 years and barely touched what was owed. Under Crown law, unpaid household debt could be converted into service. Or a mating contract. Tonight had been the creditor's preferred solution. Alexander studied her. If nobody chose you, where were you going? The northern labor estates. And you prefer that? Yes. This time his reaction was visible. Not anger. Curiosity. That frightened Evie more. Alexander Blackwood was supposed to be cold, impatient, almost impossible to interest. She had somehow made him interested. Why? I can work. You can also marry. Those aren't the same thing. Something almost like amusement touched his mouth, then vanished. Behind them, the auctioneer shifted uneasily. Your Majesty, there is one procedural matter. Alexander didn't look away from Evie. What? For a royal mating contract, the ceremonial acceptance must be completed before witnesses. Evie's blood chilled. She knew exactly what that meant. The auctioneer continued. His Majesty must take the Omega's bare hand and declare his selection. Evie's fingers curled beneath her sleeves. Alexander saw. Of course he saw. His gaze dropped to her concealed hands. Is that the problem? No, the answer came too quickly. Alexander's eyes lifted. Evie could feel her pulse beating in her throat. He stepped closer until only a few feet separated them. For the first time she caught his scent beneath rain and leather, cedar, cold air, and something darker that made the wolf-less part of her instinct scream that a predator stood nearby. Yet he didn't touch her. Not yet. Miss Carter, Your Majesty, if there's a reason I shouldn't choose you, now would be an excellent time to tell me. There were 100 reasons. None she could safely speak aloud. Evie lowered her eyes. Alexander waited. When she remained silent, he turned toward the auctioneer. Prepare the contract. A wave of whispers swept through the hall. Evie's head snapped up. Wait. Alexander looked back. Please. She hated how desperate she sounded. I don't want anything from you. The whispers became louder. Alexander's face went still. Most men would have heard an insult. He seemed to hear a puzzle. Everyone wants something. I want to leave. His gaze held hers. And yet you were willing to be sent north to avoid me. Evie said nothing. Alexander extended one hand. The gesture was simple, controlled, but Evie stared at it as if he had drawn a blade. His hand remained between them. Come here. She couldn't. Around them, hundreds waited. The auctioneer watched. The crown clerk watched. Every alpha who had ignored her 10 minutes earlier watched. Evie slowly pulled one hand from her sleeve. Alexander's eyes dropped to it. Her fingers trembled. She prayed he would mistake that trembling for fear. Perhaps it was fear, just not the kind he imagined. She placed her hand above his. For a fraction of a second, she hesitated before their skin met. Run. Too late. Alexander's fingers closed around hers. A violent shudder went through him. His eyes flashed silver. And somewhere deep inside the Alpha King, something ancient suddenly went silent. Alexander's fingers tightened around Evie's hand. Not enough to hurt. Enough to keep her from pulling away. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of them moved. The auction hall had vanished from Alexander's awareness. No murmuring nobles. No crown officials. No curious alphas watching from below. Nothing. For 14 years, there had always been something inside him. His wolf paced beneath his skin like a creature trapped behind iron bars. It pushed hardest when he was angry, when blood was spilled, when another alpha challenged him. Even in sleep, Alexander felt it prowling at the edges of his consciousness. Restless, hungry, never silent. Until now, Alexander stared at the small hand inside his. His wolf had gone completely still. Not asleep, not weakened. Still, as if it were listening. Then something even stranger happened. The beast lowered its head. Alexander's breath stopped. No. His wolf bowed to no one. Your Majesty? The auctioneer's voice sounded distant. Alexander ignored him. His eyes lifted to Evie's. Only the upper half of her face was visible above the gray veil, but that was enough. She wasn't confused. She was terrified. That realization struck harder than the impossible silence inside him. She knew something had happened. Who are you? Alexander asked. Evie's fingers jerked in his grasp. Evelyn Carter. I know your name. Then you know who I am. No, his thumb shifted against her wrist. Her pulse raced beneath it. You're telling me what you're called. Evie swallowed. Isn't that usually enough at an auction? A few people nearby inhaled sharply. Alexander almost smiled. Almost. Instead, he released her. The effect was immediate. His wolf surged upright. A growl tore through Alexander's mind so violently that his jaw clenched. Noise. Pressure. Hunger. Back. Alexander stared at Evie's hand, then at her. He reached for her again. Evie recoiled. Don't. The word escaped her before she could soften it. Alexander stopped. Something dangerous entered his expression. Not rage. Attention. Give me your hand. I already did. Again. No, the audience had become painfully quiet. Evie could feel hundreds of eyes fixed on them. Humiliation she understood. Mockery she could survive. But this was different. The Alpha King was looking at her as though everyone else in the room had ceased to exist. And that was exactly what she had spent years avoiding. Alexander lowered his voice. Something happened when I touched you. I don't know what you mean. You're lying. Her stomach twisted. Then perhaps you shouldn't marry a liar. A startled cough came from somewhere below. Alexander took another step. Evie held her ground this time. Barely. You're remarkably determined to make yourself undesirable. Perhaps I'm succeeding. His eyes flashed with something she couldn't identify. Not particularly. Heat touched Evie's cheeks beneath the veil. She hated herself for it. Alexander extended his hand again. He didn't command her this time. He simply waited. Evie looked at his palm. If she refused now, he would investigate. If she obeyed, he might discover more. Neither choice was safe. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The instant their skin touched, Alexander felt his wolf settle. Not gradually. Instantly. The beast lowered itself inside him, enormous head resting on its paws. Peace flooded the space it left behind. Alexander had forgotten what peace felt like. His eyes closed. Only for a second. But Evie saw. And something about that brief surrender frightened her more than his power ever could. When his eyes opened, the coldness had changed. What did you do? Nothing. Do it again. I didn't do anything. His grip tightened. Then why is my wolf quiet? Evie's blood went cold. He had said it aloud. Around them, whispers erupted. Alexander turned his head. The sound died instantly. Evie tried to pull free. This time he let her. She tucked her hand beneath her sleeve. Alexander watched every movement. The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously. Your Majesty, shall we complete the declaration? For several seconds, Alexander said nothing. Evie silently begged him to reconsider. He had proof now that something about her was wrong. Surely that would be enough. Surely a king did not willingly bring mysteries into his own palace. Alexander faced the witnesses. I, Alexander Blackwood, accept Evelyn Carter under royal mating contract. The words struck Evie like a closing door. The auctioneer bowed. It is witnessed. Applause began uncertainly. Alexander ignored it. Evie stared at him. You shouldn't have done that. His gaze returned to her. Probably not. Then undo it. No, why? Alexander looked at the woman everyone else had rejected. He could have told her about the silence. About the first moment of peace he had known in 14 years. About the impossible sight of his wolf lowering its head to her. Instead, he said, because I want to know what you're hiding. Evie's heart stumbled. Alexander stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. And until I do, you stay where I can find you. The words should have sounded like a threat. Perhaps they were. But deep inside Alexander, his wolf lifted its head toward Evie once more. And for the first time in its life, the beast did not demand. It waited. Evie left the auction hall beside a king she had spent years hoping never to meet. By midnight, the palace gates rose before them. Black stone towers disappeared into the mist, their windows glowing gold against the rain. Guards bowed as Alexander passed. Servants flattened themselves against corridor walls. Evie noticed something quickly. Everyone feared him. Alexander barely seemed aware of it. He walked ahead until they reached a quiet wing overlooking the northern gardens. A silver-haired woman waited outside a bedroom. Mrs. Whitmore, Alexander said. Miss Carter will stay here. The woman's eyes widened at Evie's veil, but she bowed. Of course, Your Majesty. Alexander turned to Evie. 1 year. She frowned. What? The contract. His tone remained maddeningly calm. 1 year as my royal mate. You remain under my protection. Your debt disappears tonight. Evie searched his face. And afterward, you may leave. That sounded too simple. What do you expect from me? Nothing you don't agree to. She stared at him. Alexander continued. I won't claim you. I won't enter your room without permission. His eyes moved briefly toward her veil. And I won't ask you to remove that. Evie's breath caught. You don't want to see my face? I want to know what happened when I touched you. That isn't the same thing. No, for the first time, Something almost weary appeared behind his eyes. It isn't. He left before she could answer. 3 days passed. Then 5. Alexander did not summon her. Evie began to wonder whether she had imagined the strange moment at the auction, until she started noticing the animals. The palace hounds usually barked whenever she crossed the courtyard. Now they followed her. A wounded hunting dog that had bitten 2 handlers allowed Evie to clean blood from its paw. On the 6th morning, she found a young wolf trapped beneath a fallen branch near the edge of the royal forest. "Easy," she whispered. Its teeth flashed. Evie knelt anyway. When her fingers touched its fur, the animal went still. She freed its leg. Interesting. Evie froze. Alexander stood several yards away. He wore no crown, only dark riding clothes. Somehow that made him more dangerous. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." The wolf limped away. Alexander watched it disappear. That animal nearly tore a stableman's hand open yesterday. Maybe it didn't like him. Alexander looked at her. Evie regretted the words immediately. Then his mouth moved. A small smile. Gone almost before she believed she'd seen it. That evening, Alexander found her again. This time by accident. Evie was crossing the library when she noticed him asleep in a chair beside the dying fire. She stopped. The Alpha King looked different asleep. Younger. Less invincible. Then his body jerked. His hands clenched against the chair. A growl vibrated deep in his chest. Alexander. His eyes opened. Silver. Not gray. Silver. He rose so quickly the chair crashed backward. Evie stumbled away. Alexander gripped the edge of the desk, breathing hard. Leave. She should have. Instead, she saw blood. His nails had cut into his palm. "You're hurt." "Evie." It was the first time he had used her shortened name. "Leave." She approached. His eyes burned brighter. "Don't." But she was already reaching for him. Her fingertips touched his wrist. Alexander froze. The silver vanished from his eyes. His breathing slowed. The violent tension drained from his shoulders. And then there was silence. Again, Evie stared at their joined hands. Alexander did too. Neither moved. "What happens to you?" she whispered. His voice came rough. "My wolf doesn't sleep." Evie looked up. "Ever?" "Not for 14 years." Something inside her softened before she could stop it. Alexander noticed. That frightened her enough to pull away. His wolf surged back immediately. Alexander shut his eyes. Evie took another step backward. "I'm sorry." His eyes opened. "For what?" "I don't know." She turned toward the door. "Evie." Her hand stopped on the handle. Alexander stood beside the dying fire, watching her with an expression she could no longer read. "You asked what I expect from you." She waited. His gaze dropped briefly to the hand that had quieted a monster no army could control. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "I'm beginning to think I don't know." The invitation arrived the next morning. Evie read it twice. Then a third time. Royal Council reception. Formal attendance required. She found Alexander in the breakfast room. "You said I wouldn't have duties." "I said I wouldn't force intimacy." He didn't look up from the documents in front of him. "Council receptions are unfortunately not intimate." "I don't have anything to wear." "Mrs. Whitmore has solved that." "I don't want her to." That made him look up. Evie folded the invitation. "Why do they need to see me?" "They don't." "Then why am I going?" Alexander leaned back. "Because if I hide you, they'll assume you're something worth hiding." Evie's stomach tightened. "And if they see me? They'll underestimate you." He returned to his papers. "I prefer that." So did she. That evening, Evie entered the royal hall wearing a dark blue gown Mrs. Whitmore had selected. It was elegant without being extravagant. The gray veil remained. Conversation weakened the moment she appeared. Alexander stood near the throne speaking with council members. His black formal coat carried the silver wolf crest of his house. Beside him stood a woman Evie recognized immediately. Princess Catherine Ashford. Beautiful. Blonde. Royal. Exactly the kind of woman everyone expected beside a king. Catherine's eyes traveled over Evie. "So it's true." Alexander's expression cooled. "Catherine, you chose the auction girl." "I chose Evelyn." The correction was small. Evie felt it anyway. Catherine approached her. "Forgive my curiosity. We heard His Majesty selected the final woman because no one else wanted her." Several nobles listened openly. Evie kept her hands still. "You heard correctly. And you won't show your face?" "No," Catherine smiled. "How convenient." A councilman laughed. Alexander didn't. Catherine turned toward him. The crown doesn't have to honor an impulsive auction decision. My father's proposal remains available. The room grew quieter. Evie understood. This wasn't merely humiliation. It was an alternative. Catherine was offering Alexander everything Evie wasn't. Bloodline, beauty, alliance, no secrets. Counselor Harrington stepped forward. Your Majesty, Princess Catherine's union would secure 3 Eastern Pacts. Given the unusual circumstances surrounding Miss Carter's selection, the council believes reconsideration would be reasonable. Alexander's gaze moved across the council. You want me to choose again? Harrington relaxed slightly. If your Majesty wishes. Alexander looked at Catherine, then at Evie. Evie's heart began pounding. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? Freedom. Alexander could choose the princess, dissolve Evie's contract, and send her away. She should have felt relief. Instead, something painful tightened beneath her ribs. Ridiculous. She had known him less than 2 weeks. He owed her nothing. Alexander walked toward Catherine. The princess smiled. He passed her. The smile disappeared. Alexander continued until he stood beside Evie, close enough that she felt the heat of him through her sleeve. I already chose. Nobody spoke. Harrington recovered first. Your Majesty, surely you don't intend to reject an alliance for what? Alexander's voice sharpened. Harrington glanced at Evie. He didn't finish. Alexander did. A woman you consider beneath me? The councilman paled. Alexander's hand came to rest behind Evie's back without touching her. Not possession. Protection. Somehow the restraint affected her more. The auction was lawful, Alexander said. My declaration was witnessed. Evelyn Carter is my royal mate. Catherine's face hardened. You haven't even seen her. No, she could be hideous. Alexander's eyes turned cold. And one word silenced the room. Evie stared at him. Catherine stared too. Alexander continued. You're assuming her face would change my decision. Wouldn't it? No, Evie's breath caught. Catherine laughed once, without humor. You cannot possibly know that. Alexander finally looked at Evie. The hall seemed to disappear around them. I know enough. Something dangerous happened inside Evie's chest. Hope. She crushed it immediately. Alexander Blackwood wanted answers. That was all. She couldn't afford to mistake curiosity for tenderness. Then Harrington said, perhaps the veil should simply be removed. Settle the matter. Several council members murmured agreement. Evie's blood turned cold. No, her hand rose instinctively toward the fabric. Catherine stepped closer. If there's nothing shameful beneath it, why hide? Alexander moved between them. Fast. The room froze. His wolf flashed silver through his eyes. Because she said no. Catherine stopped. Alexander's voice dropped. Her face is not crown property. Evie could barely breathe. For years, people had treated every secret she kept as something they were entitled to uncover. Alexander wanted those secrets more than anyone. Yet he was the first person powerful enough to take them who had refused. Harrington bowed stiffly. Of course, Your Majesty. The musicians slowly began playing again. Conversation returned in cautious fragments. Alexander turned toward Evie. You're shaking. I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. So you've mentioned. His mouth almost curved. Then Evie noticed something across the hall. An elderly councilman stood motionless near a marble column. He wasn't looking at Alexander. He was staring at Evie's veil. More precisely, at the thin silver chain disappearing beneath it near her temple. His face had gone white. Evie recognized him. Lord Marcus Vale. She hadn't seen him since childhood. Not since the night her family disappeared. Vale's wineglass slipped from his fingers. It shattered against the floor. And without taking his eyes off Evie, he whispered a word she had prayed never to hear again. Moonborn. Moonborn. The word barely carried over the music. Evie heard it anyway. Her entire body went cold. Lord Marcus Vale stood across the hall, broken glass glittering around his boots. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Vale turned. He disappeared through the crowd. Evie reacted without thinking. I need air. Alexander caught her wrist before she passed him. Not skin. His fingers closed carefully around the fabric of her sleeve. Who was that? No one. Another terrible lie. Alexander, please. Something in her voice made him release her. Evie fled. She crossed the corridor, pushed through a side door, and stepped onto a dark stone terrace. Cold air struck her lungs. Moonborn. She hadn't heard that word spoken aloud since she was 11 years old. Since fire. Since screaming. Since her mother had pressed a silver chain into Evie's palm and told her never to let anyone see what lay beneath it. The terrace door opened. Alexander emerged. I told you I needed air. And you're getting it. Alone. That part wasn't specified. Despite everything, Evie almost laughed. It died quickly. Alexander came closer. Who is Vale? You know who he is. I know what he is. I asked what he is to you. Evie looked toward the gardens. Someone from my childhood. Alexander went still. You told the auction clerk you had no recognized family line. I don't. That's different from having no family. Her hand rose unconsciously toward the silver chain beneath her veil. Alexander noticed. Before he could speak, a scream tore through the ballroom. Then glass shattered. Alexander spun. Stay here. He was through the door before Evie could answer. Another scream followed. Evie ran after him. The ballroom had erupted into chaos. A man in a servant's uniform stood near the royal table, but no servant moved like that. His eyes glowed yellow. Black veins crawled across his throat. Rogue. Poisoned rogue. 3 guards were already bleeding. The attacker saw Alexander. He smiled, then lunged. Alexander met him halfway. The impact sent both men crashing into a banquet table. Guests scattered. Alexander struck once. Bone cracked. But the rogue didn't fall. He pulled a silver blade from his coat. Evie's breath stopped. The blade was black along its edge. Wolfsbane. Alexander. He turned half a second too late. The knife cut across his ribs. Alexander staggered. His wolf exploded. Silver flooded his eyes. A growl rolled through the room, so deep the chandeliers seemed to tremble. The rogue backed away. Alexander shifted halfway. Claws lengthened. His teeth sharpened. But something was wrong. He wasn't looking only at the attacker anymore. He was looking at everyone. Clear the room, a guard shouted. Alexander's wolf had lost the distinction between threat and prey. A young servant fell while trying to escape. Alexander turned toward her. Evie moved. She didn't think. She ran directly between them. Evie, someone screamed. Alexander's silver eyes locked onto her. His claws were inches from her throat. Evie raised both hands. Alexander. He snarled. She touched his face. The room vanished. Heat flashed beneath her palms. Pain ripped across her temple. The silver chain snapped. Her veil fell. For the first time in years, Evie's face was exposed beneath open light. Chestnut hair tumbled loose around pale skin. There was no monstrous scar. No deformity. Only the mark. A silver crescent glowed at her right temple. Alexander froze. His claws retracted. His breathing slowed. The violent silver disappeared from his eyes. But Evie wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the council. Several older members had gone white. Lord Vale had returned. And his expression confirmed everything. He knew. Alexander touched the wound beneath his coat, then looked at Evie. At her uncovered face. At the glowing crescent. His expression changed. Not because she was beautiful. Recognition. Moonborn, he whispered. Evie stepped away. Alexander stared at the mark. That bloodline is extinct. So everyone believes. The ballroom doors slammed shut. Royal guards surrounded them. Not Evie. The council. Counselor Harrington pointed toward her. Your Majesty, step away from that woman. Alexander's face hardened. Careful. She is Moonborn. I gathered that. You don't understand. Harrington's fear was almost frantic now. The Moonborn weren't healers. They could command alpha wolves. Quiet them. Enrage them. Bend royal blood to their will. Evie felt every eye turn toward her. There it was. The reason her mother had died hiding her. Alexander looked at Evie. Is that true? I can't command you. But you can quiet my wolf. Yes. How? I don't know. Harrington laughed bitterly. Of course she knows. Her kind were bred for it. Alexander's head snapped toward him. Her kind. Harrington immediately lowered his gaze. Evie hardly heard them. A memory had surfaced. Her father barring the cottage door. Her mother shoving Evie through a hidden passage. Horsemen outside. And on their cloaks, a silver wolf. The royal crest. Evie looked at Alexander. His crest. Who killed them, she asked. Alexander frowned. My family. The room became painfully quiet. Who ordered the Moonborn purge? No one answered. Evie turned toward Vale. He looked away. Alexander's face changed. He understood before anyone spoke. My father, he said. Vale closed his eyes. Yes. The answer cut deeper than Evie expected. Alexander stepped toward her. She backed away. Evie. Don't. He stopped. You knew about the purge? I knew the Moonborn rebelled. That's what they told you. Alexander said nothing. Her eyes burned. All my life, I thought hiding made me safe. She looked around the ballroom. At the frightened nobles. At the guards. At people who had mocked her veil an hour earlier and now stared as though she were a weapon. Suddenly the insult of being called ugly seemed almost merciful. Alexander reached toward her. Evie flinched. His hand stopped. Something wounded crossed his face. Then a guard shouted from the balcony, "Your Majesty." Everyone turned. A black feathered arrow had been driven into the wooden doors. A note was tied around its shaft. Alexander ripped it free. Only one sentence had been written across the paper. The last Moonborn belongs to us. Alexander slowly raised his eyes to Evie. She understood the truth immediately. Her secret had survived for 13 years. It had lasted less than 13 minutes after her veil fell. Alexander doubled the guard before midnight. By dawn, Evie understood she had become the most protected prisoner in the Northern Kingdom. 2 guards stood outside her room. For watch the corridor. Another patrol crossed the garden beneath her window every 15 minutes. Alexander called it protection. Evie knew what locked doors felt like regardless of the name given to them. She found him in the council chamber that afternoon. He stood over a table covered with old documents. Maps, sealed reports, and brittle pages surrounded him. Lord Vale stood nearby. Evie stopped in the doorway. Alexander looked up. "You shouldn't be here. I'm getting tired of hearing that." Vale lowered his eyes. Evie walked toward the table. One document bore the royal wolf crest. Her stomach tightened. "What are those?" Alexander didn't answer immediately. "That was enough. You've been investigating me. I've been investigating what happened to your family. Without telling me. There wasn't time. There was time to surround my room with guards." His jaw tightened. "Someone fired a threat into my ballroom." "A threat about me?" "Exactly." Evie looked down. A faded decree lay partly beneath Alexander's hand. She pulled it free. Moonborn Containment Act. Her blood chilled. Alexander reached for the paper. She moved it away. "Evie." "No," she read. Moonborn survivors were to be located, registered, placed under Crown supervision. Their abilities were to be studied for the protection of royal blood. Evie's hands began trembling. This wasn't a purge. Alexander's silence hurt. It was ownership. The decree was issued by my father. But it's still law. For now. Evie looked at him. For now. Alexander exhaled. "I need to understand what we're dealing with before I dismantle a law that has existed for decades." There it was. Understand. Study. Control. Different words. Same cage. Vale stepped forward. "Miss Carter, the king is trying to protect you." My mother used those exact words before she hid me under a floor while royal soldiers burned our home. Vale flinched. Alexander went still. Evie's eyes burned. "I spent 13 years believing there was something wrong with me. There isn't. You don't know that. I know enough." She laughed softly. "You said that at the reception." Alexander came around the table. "I meant it." "Did you?" He stopped. Evie looked at the reports. "At the auction, nobody wanted me because they thought I was ugly." "Evie." Then your wolf went quiet. Her voice cracked. "And suddenly the Alpha King wanted to know everything about me. That isn't what happened, isn't it?" "No." She stepped closer. "Then answer one question." Alexander's expression hardened with caution. Evie's heart pounded. "If I couldn't quiet your wolf, would you still have chosen me?" Alexander opened his mouth. Nothing came. Only a second passed. Maybe 2. It was enough. Evie nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She turned away. Alexander caught her arm. "Again, only fabric. Never skin without permission." That kindness made it worse. "You asked me a question that doesn't have a simple answer." "It does." "No, it doesn't." His voice sharpened. "I chose you before I knew what you were. Because you wanted the last woman. And I chose you again." Evie stopped. Alexander's grip loosened. "In front of Catherine. In front of the council. Before I saw your face. Before I knew the word Moonborn." Her throat tightened. "Then why couldn't you answer?" Alexander's eyes met hers. "Because the truth frightened him too. My wolf noticed you first." The words landed softly. Cruelly. Evie pulled away. "Thank you. That isn't all I said." It was enough. She left. That night, Evie packed nothing. There was nothing she wanted from the palace. She removed the royal dresses and put on the plain blue gown she'd worn at the auction. Mrs. Whitmore found her near the servants' stairs. "You're leaving?" Evie nodded. "The king won't permit it. He promised I could leave after 1 year." That was before someone threatened your life. Evie smiled sadly. There will always be a reason powerful men believe a cage is necessary. Mrs. Whitmore said nothing. Perhaps that silence was permission. An hour later, Evie crossed the old eastern bridge beyond the palace walls. She did not see the rider following at a distance. She did not see the second figure waiting among the trees. She only felt free. For the first time since the auction, nobody was watching her. Then a branch snapped. Evie turned. Too late. A cloth covered her mouth. A sharp scent filled her lungs. Her knees buckled. The last thing she saw was a silver wolf crest sewn inside her attacker's coat. Back at the palace, Alexander entered Evie's room just after midnight. Empty. The bed untouched. The gray veil she had worn at the auction lay folded on the table. He stared at it. Something inside him tore loose. Evie. No answer. His wolf slammed against his control. Alexander grabbed the veil. Her scent remained on the fabric. Faint. Warm. Hers. His knees nearly gave. He had thought silence was what he wanted. For 14 years, he had dreamed of escaping the beast inside him. Now the room was silent. And he hated it. Alexander pressed the veil against his palm. His wolf wasn't asking for peace. It wasn't asking for the moonborn. It wasn't asking for the woman who could control it. One desperate instinct tore through both man and beast. Find her. Alexander stormed into the corridor. Seal every gate. Guards scattered. Your Majesty? Wake the trackers. Search the roads. Nobody leaves the Northern Territory. His captain stared at him. Alexander's eyes flashed silver. And find Marcus Vale. The captain hesitated. Lord Vale left the palace an hour ago. Alexander froze. The pieces aligned. The recognition at the reception. The old decree. The arrow. Evie's question. Would you still have chosen me? Alexander looked down at the veil in his hand. When he spoke again, his voice was terrifyingly calm. Bring me my horse. Where are you going? Alexander lifted his eyes. To bring her home. His wolf growled. For once, Alexander did not restrain it. But beneath the rage was something far more dangerous. Fear. Not fear of losing the only woman who could quiet his wolf. Fear of losing Evie, and realizing the difference too late. Evie woke to the sound of chains. Cold iron circled her wrists. For several seconds, she couldn't remember where she was. Then torchlight sharpened the room around her. Stone walls. No windows. And Lord Marcus Vale standing beyond the bars. You. Vale looked older than he had at the reception. More frightened too. I am sorry, Evelyn. You kidnapped me. I saved you. Evie laughed bitterly. Men keep doing terrible things to me and calling it protection. Vale flinched. He unlocked the cell. Come. The council is waiting. The words made her blood run cold. This was the council? Part of it. He wouldn't meet her eyes. The old families have waited decades for another moonborn. Why? Vale looked at her then. Because kings become dangerous. Evie thought of Alexander's silver eyes. His claws. The way his wolf had almost attacked the servant. You were never meant to be destroyed, Vale continued. Your bloodline existed to restrain royal alphas. My family was murdered. By men who feared what they couldn't control. And now you want to control me instead. Vale had no answer. They took her upstairs. When the doors opened, Evie stopped. She knew the room. The royal mating auction hall. The platform was empty now. No unwanted women. No bidders. Only council members gathered beneath the chandeliers. Councillor Harrington stood at the center. Evelyn Carter. Evie's stomach twisted. Not Evie. Never Evie. Under the Moonborn Containment Act, you are property of the crown. I belong to no one. That is not what the law says. A familiar voice thundered from the entrance. Then the law is wrong. Every head turned. Alexander stood in the doorway. Blood stained his shirt. Silver chains wrapped around his forearms and throat, glowing faintly against his skin. Evie's heart stopped. Alexander. He looked at her. Not the council. Not Harrington. Her. Relief crossed his face so nakedly that it hurt to see. Then guards surrounded him. Harrington smiled. You shouldn't have come alone. I didn't. A howl erupted outside. Then another. Dozens. The council members paled. Alexander walked forward. The silver restraints burned against his skin with every step. Evie understood. Why are you wearing those? To keep this between men. Harrington's smile vanished. Alexander's wolf couldn't emerge. Evie couldn't quiet what Silver had already suppressed. For the first time since they met, her power gave him nothing. Harrington drew himself upright. You know the law. The Moonborn belong under royal authority. I am royal authority, not above the founding decrees. Alexander stopped beside the platform. Watch me. A murmur swept through the hall. Harrington held up an old document. Your father understood what happens when Moonborn influence the throne. My father murdered children. He protected the kingdom. Alexander's expression became lethal. No, he protected his control. Evie stared at him. Harrington turned toward her. Do you understand what you are? With training, you could stop an alpha army. Force wolves to submit. Prevent wars. There it was again. Her value measured by usefulness. Evie lowered her eyes. Alexander saw. He climbed onto the platform. The same platform where she had stood unwanted. The same place where he had chosen her. Harrington's voice sharpened. Your Majesty, step away from the Moonborn. Alexander reached inside his coat. He removed the royal signet ring. The hall went silent. My father signed a containment act with this seal. He looked at the silver wolf engraved into the ring. Then I'll use the same authority to end it. He dropped the ring onto the marble floor. Effective immediately, every decree defining Moonborn blood as property of the crown is revoked. Harrington went white. You cannot do that without council approval. I just did. You would risk the throne for one woman? Alexander looked at Evie. Her breath caught. I'm risking it for a kingdom where no woman stands on this platform because powerful men decided what she is worth. His gaze never left hers. But yes, the next words came quieter. For this woman, I would risk considerably more. Evie's eyes burned. Harrington snapped his fingers. Guards moved toward Alexander. The silver restraints prevented him from shifting. 3 men attacked at once. Alexander fought anyway. A fist struck his ribs. He staggered. Evie stepped forward instinctively. Alexander, don't. He blocked another blow. This time you don't save me. A guard drove him to one knee. Evie's crescent mark began glowing. Power surged beneath her skin. She could feel every wolf in the room. She could force them down. Alexander looked at her. No, she froze. He knew. You don't have to prove your worth by being useful. The words shattered something inside her. All her life, survival had depended on hiding what she could do. Now the most powerful man she knew was bleeding rather than asking her to use it. Alexander rose. Outside, the doors exploded inward. Royal soldiers flooded the hall. Harrington's faction surrendered within minutes. Vale sank into a chair. It was over. But Alexander didn't look victorious. He crossed the room toward Evie. A guard unlocked her chains. They fell from her wrists. Alexander stopped several feet away. He didn't touch her. Didn't command. Didn't claim. I owe you an answer. Evie's heart pounded. He removed the silver restraint from his throat. His wolf stirred inside him. Restless. Powerful. His eyes remained gray. You asked whether I would choose you if you couldn't quiet my wolf. Evie couldn't breathe. Alexander took one step closer. My wolf chose you first. Pain flickered across her face. He continued. But it was wrong about one thing. What? It thought I needed you because you gave me peace. His voice softened. I don't. Evie's eyes filled. Alexander looked around the auction hall. At first, I chose the last woman standing because I didn't care who she was. He looked back at her. The second time, I chose you because I had begun to. He opened his empty hand between them. And now I'm choosing you when you can do absolutely nothing for me. Evie's breath trembled. No wolf. Another step. No Moonborn power. Another. No contract. He stopped. Just you. Tears slipped down Evie's cheeks. Alexander didn't wipe them away. He waited. For once, the Alpha King demanded nothing. Evie looked at his open hand, then at the broken chains around her feet. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His wolf went quiet. Alexander smiled faintly. But this time, neither of them mistook the silence for the reason he held on. 1 year later, Evelyn Carter returned to the royal mating auction hall. This time, there was no number tied around her wrist. No gray veil covered her face. No auctioneer waited to announce her worth. Evie stood outside the great doors with one hand resting against the cool silver handle, listening to hundreds of voices beyond it. You can still change your mind. She turned. Alexander Blackwood stood several feet behind her. A year had changed him in ways strangers probably wouldn't notice. He was still the Alpha King, still broad-shouldered and intimidating in black formal clothes, still capable of silencing a council chamber with a glance. But Evie knew the differences. She knew the faint scar beneath his ribs from the wolfsbane blade. She knew he hated honey in his tea, but drank it when his throat hurt. She knew he slept better when rain struck the windows. And she knew that when his wolf became restless at night, Alexander no longer came searching for her hand. Sometimes he simply came searching for her. That difference had taken Evie months to trust. "Are you trying to get rid of me?" she asked. His mouth curved. "I've discovered that doesn't work. Maybe you're not trying hard enough. I searched half the Northern Territory the last time you left." Evie smiled. Very romantic. It wasn't. No. I was furious. I remember. And terrified. Her smile faded. Alexander rarely admitted fear. Even now. Evie looked at the doors again. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because the last time I walked into this room, everyone else decided what happened to me." She looked at him. "Today I want to walk in because I chose to." Alexander nodded once. No argument. That, too, had taken them months. Evie opened the doors. Conversation stopped. Hundreds of people rose. Sunlight poured through windows that had once been hidden behind heavy curtains. The old auction platform remained, but its iron railing had been removed. Above it hung a new inscription: "No bond without choice." Evie's throat tightened. The royal mating auction no longer existed. Alexander had abolished it 3 months after the Moonborn Containment Act. In its place stood the Free Bonding Registry, where shifters could register voluntary unions regardless of pack rank, debt, bloodline, or designation. Nobody could be sold to settle a household debt again. Evie walked forward. She wore silver blue, but not because someone had dressed her for inspection. Her chestnut hair fell freely over her shoulders. At her right temple, the silver crescent remained uncovered. Some people still stared. Evie let them. Lord Marcus Vale stood near the front. He had testified against Harrington and the surviving members of the old council. His testimony had revealed records of moonborn children hidden, imprisoned, and hunted across 3 generations. There had been consequences, trials, resignations, families stripped of authority, and discoveries. Evie had not been the last moonborn after all. 3 survivors had already come forward. 2 more were rumored to live beyond the eastern mountains. For the first time, moonborn children would grow up knowing their name was an inheritance, not a death sentence. Evie reached the place where Lot 27 had once stood. Her footsteps stopped. Memory returned with brutal clarity. Going once. Going twice. Unclaimed. She remembered laughter. She remembered staring at the marble and praying no man would want her. Then don't. One word had changed everything. Evie turned. Alexander remained at the far end of the hall. He wasn't walking toward her. That wasn't how they had planned this. A year ago, he had crossed this room and chosen her. Today he waited. Evie felt something warm rise behind her ribs. The registrar approached Alexander. "Your Majesty?" Alexander looked at Evie. "Ask her." The registrar blinked. "Sir, she's the one making the decision." A few people smiled. Evie did too. The registrar cleared his throat. "Miss Carter, do you wish to approach?" Such a simple question. Nobody had asked it the first time. Evie stepped forward. "Yes." She walked. Not toward a bidder. Not toward a king claiming property. Toward Alexander. When she stopped before him, his expression softened. Only slightly. But Evie saw it. She always did. "You came," he murmured. "You look surprised. I've learned not to assume where you're concerned." "Good." His eyes warmed. The registrar opened the bonding book. "Evelyn Carter, do you enter this bond voluntarily?" "Yes." "Do you understand that neither Crown authority nor Alpha designation grants your partner ownership over your person, property, bloodline, or abilities?" Evie's eyes remained on Alexander. "I do." "Alexander Blackwood, do you accept the same?" "Yes." The registrar turned the book. There were 2 blank lines. Equal length. Side by side. Evie signed first. Alexander signed second. No applause came immediately. Perhaps everyone understood that silence belonged to them. Alexander looked at her hand, then extended his. He didn't take hers. He waited, just as he had in the auction hall. But everything was different now. Evie remembered that first touch. Fear. His wolf. The impossible silence. She remembered asking the question that had nearly destroyed them. "Would you still have chosen me?" She knew the answer now. More importantly, so did he. Evie placed her hand in his. Alexander's fingers closed gently. His wolf settled. Not vanished. Not controlled. Settled. Alexander smiled. There he goes. Evie laughed softly. Still dramatic? He likes you. That's convenient. He has excellent judgment. Alexander. Occasionally, laughter moved through the hall. Then Alexander grew serious. I need you to know something. What? If you had never quieted him, I would still be standing here. Evie's breath caught. He continued. If there had been scars beneath your veil, I would still be standing here. Her eyes burned. If you had no moonborn blood, no power, no title, no connection to anything this kingdom considers valuable, he lifted her hand. I would still be standing here. A tear slipped down Evie's cheek. And if I weren't? Alexander paused. If you weren't what? Standing here. His answer came without hesitation. I'd let you go. That was when Evie understood how completely he had changed. The man who once told her she would remain where he could find her had learned the hardest form of love for a king. He had learned not to possess. Evie stepped closer. And if I came back? Alexander's forehead touched hers. I'd be grateful. She closed her eyes. No command. No claim. No destiny forcing them together. Only choice. When they finally kissed, the hall erupted. Evie laughed against his mouth. Alexander wrapped an arm around her, and for once, she didn't feel trapped. She felt held. Later, when the hall emptied and afternoon sunlight stretched across the marble, Evie returned alone to the old platform. Alexander found her there. You disappeared. I moved 30 feet. I have history with that. She smiled. Her gaze dropped to the marble. I stood right here. I remember. I thought being unwanted was the worst thing that could happen to me. Alexander came beside her. And now, Evie considered it. The worst thing would have been believing them. He looked at her. She looked back at the hall where an unwanted Omega had once hidden behind a veil. People had called her ugly because they couldn't see her. Then dangerous when they finally could. For years, Evie had allowed both judgments to define the boundaries of her life. No longer. Alexander held out his hand. Not as Alpha King. Not as owner. Not even as savior. Simply as the man waiting beside her. Evie looked at it, then placed her hand in his. Together, they walked down from the platform. Behind them, the inscription caught the last golden light of evening. No bond without choice. Once, 26 women had been chosen before Evelyn Carter. Once, she had been the last unwanted woman standing. Now the most powerful alpha in the kingdom walked beside her without pulling her forward or asking her to follow. And Evie finally understood the truth. She had never needed a king to prove she was worth choosing. She had needed the freedom to choose for herself. This time, she chose him.